Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dirt to Dust, another episode here on our little podcast here. I'm your host, Doug Langford, along here with Caleb Forbes once again. Caleb, welcome back to another episode. We're kind of getting used to this a little bit. I feel like we might actually start acting like we know what we're doing.
Just a little bit. It's still kind of weird to be in front of the camera instead of behind the camera because this is new territory for me. But and especially dealing with a little bit of Bell's palsy, my face was kind of half paralyzed when we started the very first episode. It was still the effects were there, but I think I'm coming off of that. I think I'm doing pretty good, and I think we're doing this pretty well. I noticed on the last episode between Apple Podcasts and YouTube, we had over 100 listens, which was awesome. So I think we're doing something right to start with this being so new, and so we're gonna keep doing this.
Dude, I thought about that when I first texted you, and I was like, "Hey, man, I'm going over to Best Buy. I'm replacing this and replacing that. We're going to do this again." And I'm like, you know what? I realized I just texted him, and he's like 2 days out of the hospital. like, man, what a dick move that was. But no, you were 100% on board. I was like, well, that made me feel a little bit better. But dude, I can't even, it's gone, man. Yeah. That's awesome. The speed at which you have to recover.
So today is actually 4 weeks since I was in the hospital, which was the estimated time frame. But some people actually deal with this a lot longer. I noticed there's still some lasting effects, but for the most part, I'd say I'm like 99% there. The worst of it, man, is sudden loud noises. It actually it starts messing with my equilibrium and my balance, and it'll actually start canceling out noise on one side or the other in my head. That's kind of weird. Other than that, we're doing good. Love it.
That's insane. That's crazy. Well, so yeah, let's get going here. Last week we talked about I had to think about this when I started talking to you this morning. I was like, holy crap, what was last week's episode? It just seems like it was so far away, but then I was like, oh yeah, we talked about cheap lift kits with more stuff in them versus more expensive or higher quality lift kits with less in them. And I don't know that we really solved that battle, but maybe hopefully we educated people about it. So
provided some insight,
I know at the end of the episode, I kind of teased what was coming, and that was we were going to kind of start talking about research and development, what companies do, how companies do it, even down to the shop environment, and how some shops can do it, and then how that affects pricing, availability, different generations of parts, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's get into this R&D thing, and let's start talking about it. Let's get this episode of Dirt to Dust going.
When other people see dirt, you see glory. And when you see a vehicle for the first time, your first thought is not how pretty it is, but how much abuse can it take? This is Dirt to Dust, presented by Outlaw Offroad. If it's anything off-road and dirty, we probably like it, and we're probably talking about it. You'll get industry info, tech talk, and interviews with the biggest and best in the industry. Let's do it. This is Dirt to Dust. And now your hosts, Doug Langford and Caleb Forbes.
All right, boys and girls, here we go. We said it to start this thing off. We are going to be talking about research and development today. I hope that this is not super crazy, insane, boring, because I don't know. Hopefully this is a topic that people actually listen to and be like, oh, I didn't know that. Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe a lot of people don't realize what this is and how important it is. So I think at minimum, I want to provide a little bit of understanding of why some things are more expensive that we touched on last week. And this was one of the topics that we hit that was, hey, this does make a product more expensive. So anything that we can do to clarify some things, I think is good. It might be a little more educational than, funny, but I think it's a topic that definitely needs to be hit on because it's going to provide some clarity to some people down the road.
We'll have some laughs at people don't know what they're talking about. And we'll start there. Speaking of people that don't know what they're talking about, Facebook groups. It's the reason for this episode, man. You get it all the time. You get all these groups and it's like, what's the best lift kit for this? And these people are just on there and they're just recommending what they have. And they're like, well, they act as if the only difference is price.
Right.
Like, okay, I get it. You get on a website, you see a kit that's, $499.95 or $299, whatever it is, coils, not coil space, whatever. But all these people are seeing is a number, and it's just so aggravating. I mean, I got up this morning and I get up fairly early because I like to get into the office kind of before everybody starts working. I like to get some work done. I feel like I'm very productive. And some of what I do is scroll the socials, and I came across this post, and I don't remember what it was on, but it was talking about just this super overgeneralized question. And it was a local group. It wasn't a national one. And usually I'm a little nicer on the local groups because, I don't want to be, sometimes I do let it loose on the national ones just because, it is kind of what it is, right? Like I've kind of,
sometimes you just see a post.
They do.
Like, you just walked right into that.
If you do come up to me and you happen to see me in Moab or somewhere out, you're like, you made a mean comment to me on Facebook. I don't care. Like, I really don't. But, I also don't want to be like a total jerk. So in my head, I'm thinking like I could go for 10 minutes on this guy and tell him why he's just absolutely flat out wrong. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have the time. There's just so much out there that is so bad. I'm like, you know what? I am really glad that we are filming a podcast today because hopefully, maybe someday down the road, somebody can link to this or one of these other episodes or something, and it can do that. But yeah, I just, that's the whole point of this R&D episode is because people that just see a number, and to everybody out there in La La Land, it is not just a number. There's so much that goes into that number. So
we could get into a further episode with material. Well, we talked about materials a little bit, but material, like how expensive the machinery is and how fine the lasers are that are cutting the steel. How, like, you don't even, like, the companies out there that are having to pay an engineer to design these things, and that guy's salary might be well into the six figures just to design the parts that go under these things before they're even manufactured whatsoever. So I think all of that plays into. But first of all, and just to kind of touch on our first point, people hear R&D, research and development, but what is R&D?
So, obviously everybody knows what you hear the term R&D and everybody thinks science or pharmaceuticals or medical research. Science doctors do R&D, and we're trying to cure cancer, and that's all good. Like, cancer sucks. I want to cure cancer just as much as the next guy. I'm not smart enough to do that, so I do off-road things. But in our market, in our industry, R&D is it's really just two sides of the same coin. Side one is kind of in-house R&D. Side two would be, kind of in the field. In-house R&D would be, for those companies that do it in the U.S., that do most of their stuff in the U.S., they're on their computer, they're on AutoCAD, they're on all of these programs that I don't know. I hear names all the time thrown around. They're on these computer programs, and they're physically drawing out these renders and these 3D models of parts, and then they're sending them out to sheet metal, or they're doing them in-house, whatever their capabilities are, and they're cutting and they're bending, and then they're welding it up and they're testing it, and they're doing all of that stuff in-house to test fitment, and kind of how it works in a shop or warehouse, whatever industrial environment. And that's kind of internal R&D. And then obviously in the field's pretty self-explanatory. We're taking stuff, once we've kind of done the in-house stuff, we're taking it out and we're beating on it, we're abusing it. That can be through as simple as some of these companies that you see organizing wheeling trips. I'm here to tell you, yes, they like wheeling, but this is R&D for these guys, everyone. Just so you know, little secret. I can tell you from experience, when these companies are coming up with these wheeling events, it's R&D. I can just tell you that right now. We'll dive into that with some specifics 100%. Later. But that's kind of field R&D. Let's put it out on a trail. Let's put it on some rocks. Let's put it out racing. What we do, that's R&D for a lot of the companies that we've partnered with. Most of them, it is some form of R&D. And again, we'll get into that a little bit later. So, these guys are, let's put it on the race car and see what happens. And if we can make an improvement, or because they know that 99.99% of their customers are never going to do to their product what I can do to their product in $46.99 or any of the racers. So they know if it holds up there, or sometimes less, if it can hold up under those circumstances, then it's going to hold up. But that's R&D. You got in-house R&D and then field R&D.
So what you're saying is, I need to design an Outlaw Off-Road R&D department t-shirt for wheeling trips?
Yeah,
the official abuse testers.
A little too much early in the morning. Hit me with that later in the week and later in the afternoon.
Yeah, let's get a cup of coffee.
I'm only one cup of coffee and half a Monster into this day. All right,
I need at least another cup of coffee to move on that one.
At least.
So in that case, I mean, that sounds like a phenomenal idea and a phenomenal way to make sure your products are gonna take the abuse and just last off the road, which is obviously what the end goal is. Why would companies choose to like not R&D their products?
Because phenomenal also means phenomenally expensive.
True. That is true.
It is time consuming and it is financially consuming. And if you as a company can say, well, I'm going to do the minimal amount of R&D for two reasons. Number one, I want to get a product to market because I'm not making any money off of this product until I'm able to sell it. If I can't sell it to the end use consumer, then I'm not making a dime. And the other one would be to be able to hit a price point. If my business model, and we all have business models, if my business model calls for me to be a certain type of company, I am a budget company or I am a low to intermediate price point company. Every one of these companies knows where they want to be and where they want to hit and how to get there. Then they're going to go, look, we have a X budget for R&D, and some it's astronomical and some it's astronomically low. But it's not a knock on that company. It's just that's their space, their niche in the market. That's kind of their business plan, their business model. That's what they've said. Look, we're going to get it as close as we can based on previous experience with previous vehicles, previous models. And we're going to get close and maybe we're good. It's why you'll see some companies kind of known for being good for certain vehicles and not for others. It's because they got it good. They got it pretty good on the first swing, and they may nail it on the first swing. They may miss. The problem is that even if they miss, they're not going to make too many changes. You know, there's a couple companies out there, and there's lots of them that do it, so I won't name one. When the JL Wrangler came out in 2018, there was this race to get product to the market.
Yeah, everyone wanted to be first.
Some of them hit the market very some wanted to be first to market. Some deliberately didn't. But the ones that wanted to be first to market, they kind of went based on what they saw in the JK, and you could approach that two ways. Metal Cloak, for example. I'm not hitting on Metal Cloak, but I'll see what they did. When Metal Cloak first came out, we all kind of knew, and even Rockcrawler did this to a certain extent. We knew very quickly that you could put a JK front coil spring on a JL, and the difference was 1 inch. So if I put a 3.5 inch spring, I was going to get an extra inch of lift. So if I put a 2.5 inch JK spring on the front of a JL, I was getting about 3.5 inches. These are rough numbers. Nobody does this anymore, by the way, but we did this back then. On the back, we found out we could put a TJ spring back there. And the difference was about 2 inches under just because of the weight, TJ versus JL. So we could put a TJ, like a 5.5 inch TJ spring in the back. We were getting like 3.5 inches of lift. Now we were getting ride heights right, and it was riding down the road. It wasn't riding down the road amazingly well. Now, if you had a company that had a JK coil dialed in and a TJ coil kind of dialed in, then they were getting close. So at that point, if you're a company, you're at a fork in the road. You go, okay, my R&D budget says I can't really do anything else. Is this where I stand? Do I stick here? And some companies did. And they didn't develop anything else, and they put a kit out, and, you know, for aesthetics, they're fine, and for everything else, they're kind of And it really just depended on how good they were on JK and TJ stuff. Companies then like Metal Cloak and Rockcrawler came out and said, okay, this is what we're going to do to get a kit out. Agree with it, disagree with it, right, wrong, indifferent. We're all in business at the end of the day, and we can't wait 3 years to put a product to market, right? So then Metal Cloak kind of went down the middle of the road, and they kind of said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And people called them out for it. And I'm like, I mean, I get it kind of to an extent, but it wasn't that much of a difference to be like, yo, you guys suck. You shouldn't be admit. It wasn't that bad. Because a lot of companies did this. A lot more than you'll ever know did that. And then they developed new stuff. They developed JL specific stuff. And then they kind of re-released. As it went. And now for the last several years, it's been JL specific. This didn't go on very long. Rockcrawler did the same thing. Rockcrawler goes to is an example of going even further, where they put out that first edition of the kit, and then they put out a second, and then they put out a third, and then they changed the joints and put out a fourth. Like Jeremy Turek is like, dude, this guy, man, this guy's brain works differently, and he's always putting out new SKUs, and they're changing joints, and they're doing this, and they don't mind saying, look, we understand, their sticker colors are different by year at Rockcrawler. If you look at a Rockcrawler part that you bought, and it can be a red sticker, a blue sticker, a purple. They didn't just decide they wanted to rainbow out their stickers, everyone. That's how they know. That's how looking on a shelf, what year that sticker was from, or what edition that part was from. And we can tell by looking at that color of sticker how recent a model that part is. So, that's kind of on the extreme end of R&D and constant trying to improve and evolve. Metal Cloak kind of right in the middle of they're doing it the right way. Get a kit out, understanding that you're going to do better, then do better, and that's kind of your kit. And then there's obviously a ton of other companies that just kind of throw out the first one, get it as close as they can, and that's where it's at. And that's reflected in those companies' price points.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I also remember pretty early on, it had to have been within the first generation of the JL kit, that Jeremy and Rockcrawler, also realized there was some significant coil bow inherent to the JL, and they also designed a coil isolator at the bottom to fix that bow. So that's a pretty cool example of seeing what works with your product and quickly offering a solution, knowing that we're going to deal with this and there's no way around it, but here's what you got to install. Here's how you install it. We're going to incorporate it into our install guides. So to me, it's really cool to see a company respond that quickly and then continually push themselves to make it better. Now that does come with a headache, like you said, updating every year or every 2 years or however many updates they come out with. But at the same time, the people who are buying the newest iteration are always getting the best that Rockcrawler can give them. And two, I want to say that Jeremy has always made the kits upgradable. So if there's something else better out there a couple years down the road, you can swap joints and you can replace things. And so
yeah. If I wanted to take my X Factor joints out of something that I bought 6 years ago, OG, the arm is still the same. It's still the same old Rockcrawler, solid steel. And most companies are like this. They're going to keep their same dimensions where you can rebuild a new joint style into an old joint housing. They're going to keep the same that same drill out, that same diameter to basically screw in an adjustable joint. That thread pitch and that diameter is still going to be the same. So you can just take your arm out, unscrew the old joint, throw it in the scrap bin, put the newest, the latest and greatest in there, and you're rocking and rolling for a fraction of what it would be. So they're not just leaving people in the dirt, but again, you're still having to do your R&D within that too. You can't just design an entirely new arm without pissing off a lot of people. So you got to make sure that you're doing that, doing everything you can within the confines of what you've kind of already done in the past. And that has its pluses and its minuses, like everything.
But on the plus side, like we mentioned in a previous episode, those joints, regardless of how good they're advertised, at some point, to the extent of your abuse on it, is going to be a wear and tear item. So at some point, that's going to have to be replaced anyways.
For sure.
So why not get the latest and greatest when you go to replace it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, but if you think about from a marketing standpoint, think when Metal Cloak came out, and on that when they put the JL kit out in. Oh, when did I first get that? We'll talk about shop R&D in a little bit, but I got that probably mid 2018, something like that.
You're pretty quick there.
It was one of the first kits they put out, and it was when they were doing the JK. It was when it was early enough to where the front coils were still JK coils. I think it was a JK coil front, and then it was they had done a JL specific coil for the rear. And I remember that, but I remember their big thing being maintenance free joints. Right. And that was a huge, huge thing. I cannot remember how many times, and this went on for 3 or 4 years, where Metal Cloak's big selling point, at least to the general public, it may not be what they were pushing. Well, they kind of were too, was maintenance free joints, set it and forget it kind of thing. They, it was the do it for me, not necessarily lazy, but that part of the market that was like, I want a quality U.S. produced brand, but I don't want to, have to do, rock crawling things that are, a ton of maintenance on joints and rebuilding and replacing. I want something maintenance free. So Metal Cloak got on that really early, and they were smart to do so, where they said, look, this is going to be a big improvement to what you bought from the factory, but it's going to be maintenance free. You're not having to rebuild joints every year. You're not having to grease them up all the time. And, that's where they got ahead. I think they were actually ahead for a long time of pretty much everybody else in the JL game, for sure, was because of that. They had that unique marketing because they're zinc coated, right? Everybody knows that they have that very, it's very visible. You know what it is. And you can have a conversation about their quality and their build and what they do and how they do it all you want. But from a marketing standpoint, they absolutely hit pay dirt with continuing, obviously, the gold, the zinc plated, goodness that they produce. And it's not bad product. Is there worse out there? Absolutely. Is there better out there? Absolutely. But it was good, solid product. And then to go maintenance free, to understand the market really before the market started to turn. They were doing it before COVID.
For sure.
And COVID kind of changed that for a lot of people. But Metal Cloak was already there. So all they had to do was be like, hey, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing.
The marketing team was on it for that.
Maintenance free, and they're hammering on maintenance free. And it took everybody else. It took some other companies a few years to catch up. But by then, Metal Cloak already had that foothold, and they continue to possess that big market share in the JL and JT market because of that.
So we've touched on Metal Cloak and Rockcrawler, but what other companies that it's like pretty obvious that they spend some time in R&D, and not just in the Jeep world too? I want to talk about outside Jeep world. We deal with Tacomas, Tundras, Ford, Chevys. We deal with everything, and I think we've even lowered some vehicles, as sacrilegious as that sounds. But stop it. Just for the full spectrum of our, the industry that we deal with, including not just suspension, but also bumpers, armor, stuff like that. Are there some clear companies that, like, hey, these guys absolutely spend some time in R&D?
Yeah, absolutely. And several come to mind when you talk about suspension. And all these companies do Jeep suspension, but the ones I'm thinking of, Jeep specific, JKS Manufacturing is one that a lot of people don't think about. I know a lot of those guys at JKS. Of course, that's a Fox affiliated company. And I know a lot of those guys and what they do to those vehicles from the Fox. And specifically, there are specific guys at JKS that go out and beat on this stuff that JKS does. So JKS is one that comes to mind. BDS Suspension, another Fox affiliated company, more on the truck side. They may not like me saying this. I don't look to them a lot when I think Jeep. I just don't. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I just don't, with all the Jeep stuff that I'm so super familiar with. And BDS is just not something that I've gone out there and put my brain to a lot for whatever reason. But BDS is absolutely, at the top of the game for truck stuff. 100%. They do a lot of R&D. They've got that no questions asked, lifetime warranty. Again, another Fox affiliated company, so you can trust the quality there. That is their top level stuff on truck. They're like a, their ride quality is every bit as good as a Carly or any of that. Carly obviously has a much more limited SKU house, right? They don't put stuff on nearly as much as BDS, but BDS is one. And then kind of on the, yes, they make suspension for everything, and it's pretty good, but where they really shine is Toyota's Icon.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Icon is another one that would love, you call them up and say, hey guys, I just bought this. I did it. I just bought this Tacoma. I've got like 5 weeks to build it. We're going to go out and film this thing in Utah. And they were like, dude, what can we put on it? Like, that's where we want to be. We want you go out there and do it, cause we were going out. That was when we were filming, that Moab trip with the Mighty Five. And we were doing, 5 days with 5 national parks, and we didn't see a whole lot of pavement. No. And I had that Tacoma, but I think it was just an Icon middle of the road. It wasn't a stage 1, stage 2. Icon, of course, goes all the way up to stage 15,379,000.
Realistic, I think it's like a stage 4 or 5 is like their top end, most expensive.
Oh, no, they go up to like 8
really?
10 now.
Okay.
Well, when you start talking about, it's what we talked about last week when we were talking about quantity and quality. They're just adding quality. Okay. It's all the same stuff. They're just adding quantity of parts, depending on what you do. And I think it was like a stage 5 Icon kit. And then we took it out and we did it, and the truck performed great. So, and they do that stuff too. They do it all the time. So that's another one. And there's more out there that do that. Curry Enterprises is one. They actively pursue people to go and test axle stuff with, and different brackets and different geometry and different circumstances, and traditional center sections versus fabricated center sections. That's another one that does that. So there's tons of them out there, and that's a couple that come to mind. On the armor side, I think Next Venture Motorsports, only because I have a firsthand knowledge of those guys. Dude, you have not seen somebody get more excited when I break their stuff
than Dan.
Dude, I nailed one of their rear bump. No rear bumper would have survived this. And there's actually kind of did, but I put this big dent in the middle of the rear bumper. And they come up to the tent after I come back from running, and they're jumping up and down like, oh, that's exactly what we needed. That's awesome. That's the best. We're going to put a gusset here. And I'm like, not only were they looking at it, but they found a point where they could improve, and they were already talking about how they could make it better and what they were going to do. And they're like, dude, we're going to send you an RMA. We need you to send that back. We're going to hang this up in the lot. I'm just going to send you a new bumper. Like, but I want that bumper back. They did the same thing last year with the corner armor that Mick Henson just drilled Jeremy in it at King of the Hammers 2023. And they're like, dude, we want that back. We're going to hang it up. They want it. They want that stuff.
So
they want that.
So Next Venture was actually at the lake bed with you during Hammers. That's
absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. For several days.
That's a whole level of commitment, because I mean, for one, it's already a big deal for a company to sponsor a car like that in a race car, and to get the exposure off of that, and to trust that you're going to test it and represent them well. But it's a whole new level of commitment to say, hey, look, we're all the way in Colorado. We're going to take some time to come out to the lake bed, hang out with you, and then personally see what happens to our stuff. That's awesome. Like, kudos to Next Venture for doing that, because that's a huge commitment.
Well, that's why I love some of these companies we did. Over half of our actual sponsors on 4699 were at KOH.
That's incredible.
Raceline was actively there, going around and looking at stuff. Mickey Thompson was actively there. AccuAir was there. American Iron, Rock Crawler was in the main pits, running our pits all day. Next Venture Motorsport, these guys were there getting it done. Garrett from Curry Enterprises, they were there, and they were local, so they were calling, hey, I'm coming out. Do you need to bring anything? Like, they were bringing stuff to the pits. Like, I wasn't there. He dropped it off, called me later, and goes, hey, I just want to make sure you got what I needed. Like, these guys were I love marketing partners like that, because they're so involved. That's R&D for them, and they take it seriously, and they want to make sure that, hey, if we're going to do this, let's maximize our efforts here and get every last ounce of good quality R&D that we can. And I love all those guys for it. They're awesome. And they make racing more fun.
For sure. So with that, though, obviously those guys are not doing that for nothing. They're getting something out of that. So what does them being at the lake bed or having that relationship with you and really dialing the R&D, how does that ultimately and overall affect the retail pricing?
I mean, everything costs money, right? If Dan Ford, the founder, owner of Next Venture Motorsports, is going to leave Grand Junction, Colorado, and go to the lake bed, there's costs involved. He's got to have fuel to get out there. He's going to have to get a hotel or a campsite or something. If I destroy one of their bumpers and they put a new bumper on the race car and they take that one back for R&D, the material and all that to make that bumper, that both the bumper that I destroyed and the bumper that I'm now putting on the race car, costs money. So everything costs money. When Jeremy Purett from Rock Crawler Suspension goes and spends 2 weeks on the lake bed and organizes, that Rock Crawler team, which we're proudly a part of, obviously, that costs money. Jeremy just listed his toter home and his trailer on Facebook for sale, which has been kind of that event rig for them for the past, God knows how many years, $365,000 to get rid of that. Now, I guarantee you paid more than that for it. So there is a certain amount of money that he's going to take as a loss to do that. And that has to figure in. So if I go back to what I said at the beginning, if that's your business model and that's your plan, and you say, look, I am going to be on the cutting edge of R&D because I want to have cutting edge ride quality, cutting edge product longevity, cutting edge quality, cutting edge everything, that's going to cost money. And everything you spend has to go in. It has to go into the cost of the product. because if it doesn't, if you can't spend that money, then you're not doing that stuff. Like, I think Jeremy would be the first one to tell you that he has learned an infinite amount of knowledge from racing. 2024 was not his first King of the Hammers. 2021, when 4699 was built, was not his first King of the Hammers. He's been doing this for 10 plus years, racing all over the country. Again, not just KOH. He drove the 4699 at Crandon 3 years ago and won that race. He drove 4899. So that's all been done for years and years and years, and that all costs money. So whether it's flying out to a race, or whether it's having a race team, whether it's just building a part, not liking it, throwing it away, building another one, everything from cost of materials to labor to weld wire. I mean, everything costs money. And if you're on that side of the market, it has to go into the price. If you're on the other side, the entry level of product, you have to curtail those costs. You have to be very on top of those costs to not spend those things, so that you don't have to increase your price because your business model is the exact opposite. Not saying one's wrong and one's right, but they're just different. They're completely antithetical to each other, but they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. And depending on which end of the spectrum you're on, you're either watching those costs or you're adding those costs one way or the other.
All right. So with all that said, clearly, R&D definitely affects the end user. It's important on the front side. Other than price, and I think this is something that a lot of people need to hear, because price, that's usually the first thing people look at. They say, oh, $3,000. I'm not paying that for a suspension. But then they go on to say, oh, I want to take it on the baddest trails. I want to go to the Rubicon. I want to do every trail at Windrock. So you need this stuff. So other than price, why should a customer care about the R&D process?
I mean, some shouldn't. I mean, if we're being honest, some customers should. I mean, if you're going out and the only thing you care about is aesthetics, and your only goal is to get X size tire on there, and again, we talk about the 4 questions. If your 0 to 10 of I care about ride quality was a 3, 4, or 5, and your intended use was I just want it to look cool, then I don't know that you do care. We can disagree about that, and I think you should. I see it on I see it on Facebook. Why are you going to spend $60,000 on a vehicle and then put a $400 lift kit on it? Okay, I mean, that's a valid argument. I get it, and I probably side with you, but on the other side of that, I mean, if you're going to be the industry standard, you're going to keep the car 2.5, 3 years, and you're not going to go out and wheel it. And, the most off-road it's going to see is some speed bumps at the grocery store. I don't know how much you really care about getting into that and going down that rabbit hole. It's blue pill versus red pill. I think the real kind of line of demarcation comes when you tell me you're going to use 4-low. Like if you're going to put that vehicle in 4-wheel drive and you're going to go do things with it, now we start having to have a conversation of how deep down that rabbit hole are you going to go, because you need a suspension, or you need an armor company, or you need lights, or you need anything that's going to go with you down that path. So I think at that point you start having the conversation about, the companies. And maybe we're, as a salesperson or somebody selling that kit to a customer, I'm probably not going to have the R&D conversation. That's a little bit kind of too much in the weeds, but we are definitely going to have the quality. And to me, quality is inextricably linked to R&D. I mean, the more R&D you do, the more quality R&D you do, the better your product's going to be, and the better your product is, the higher quality you are. So, and the better that's going to be if you come and tell me, well, I got to build my Jeep for a trip to the Rubicon next year, or I'm going out to Colorado. Well, we're going to talk about some different brands. And in my head, I'm already going to the people that have done the R&D, and I know their parts are going to make it. Because at the end of the day, if you go out there and you break because I sold you a cheap kit, you should have blamed the company who built the kit, but you're going to blame me. Like, it's just is what it is. Like, there's no way around it. And I can bitch about that, and I can be mad about that, but it just is the world that we live in. So I need to at least try to educate the customer on what I would suggest and why. Now, what they do with that information, totally up to the end user. Completely up to them. It's their car, their truck, their Jeep, their money. I can't control people's bank accounts. But I can at least educate people and say, look, this is what, and this is why. and then you make that call. And then, whatever the end result is now their responsibility, not mine. But I got to at least try and do kind of what you're paying me to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we do R&D.
Yeah, absolutely.
As shop, we do R&D.
Yeah.
I've done way too much R&D, but I'll continue to do that.
And which is why I brought up the t-shirt comment earlier, because I think all of us that are a part of the Outlaw brand, I think we do a very good job at not being the end user who just puts a suspension on, puts a piece of armor on, puts lights on, whatever, and just forgets about it. I think we use every single product that we buy and that go on our rigs pretty extensively, some more than others, but I mean, I can't think of a single shop that doesn't go out at some point throughout the year and absolutely hammer on their shop rigs, which I think is important for us to know also what brands that we like to use. What are we going to use on our personal rigs? What do we trust? And move that onto the customer for sure. And I'm sure customers that go wheeling with us are going to see that and then ask, why do you use Next Venture? Why do you like Baja Designs? Why do you like Rock Crawler? And you're like, hey, watch this.
Well, it's going along with what I said about Rock Crawler and always trying to improve. We didn't, I bought a JL when they first came out, and within 6 months, I had put probably 20 different lift kits on it. Different springs, different shocks, what worked, what didn't work, what shock extended length worked with what, the drive shaft question of when do you replace the front drive shaft, all that kind of stuff. And then we built it up to go, okay, well, let's test the strength of these axles. Let's put 40s on, stock axles, stock-ish. We built them up, but still stock housings. Let's do that kind of stuff. And we did that. And then, as that kind of went down, then we had Gerald in Huntsville buying Carnage, and he was building Carnage a different way than I had built Reaper, and was going out with the full cage and with the 60s and then the 80s and all this kind of stuff. And then I said, okay, well, now we've done all that. Let's build Reaper with fabricated tail. Let's go huge. And then, that kind of went away. And then we've got, Candace in Nashville, who just took delivery of the 392 there. So they're going to build a factory 392. We had John in Gulf Coast he had a 392. So, and then I just, we talked about last week, I had gone out Jeep shopping. I bought another one.
Which we'll talk about.
So
I want to talk about that one soon. I'm excited for that one.
And the whole reason I bought this Jeep was, in that meantime, I bought the Gladiator back in 2021 when they, right after they came out, bought the Gladiator. Hemi swapped it, but kept the stock out. We wanted to see. I'm always trying to find stuff that I can do that I think the market either wants to do or is going to want to do, and I want to try to do it first. Let us, it's kind of like, don't do stupid stuff to your Jeep people. Let us do it first.
Let us test it.
Let me do it. I have no problem doing that. Right. Let's see if it works. So I'm really excited about the new Jeep because it is something that no Outlaw shop has ever done. I've not done it. No other shop has done it. No employee in the company, no manager, nobody has done what we're going to do with this new Jeep in Moab in about, I don't know, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever that is. Soon. It's going to be friggin' awesome. I can't wait. I hope it works.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for today. I think any more conversation on R&D just turns into more of a dry, educational, academic kind of textbook thing. I'm glad we hit on this though, because this is definitely some new. It got me some viewpoints that I wasn't even thinking about. But speaking of R&D, and you mentioned Next Venture, what do we got coming up for a show soon?
So I just emailed him this morning. Actually, we're trying to get the schedule to get it ready for next week, or maybe the week after. But we have secured Dan Four, owner of Next Venture Motorsports. We're going to be interviewing him, and we are going to cover. We're definitely going to cover the R&D because, again, we just had this episode, and I really want to hit on it with him because they are one company that is heavy into the R&D, and I think people will be interested to kind of hear that side, the company side, and his side of what they do, how they do it, why they do it, kind of what benefit they get from it, and all of that. So we are working on getting that scheduled. Of course, he's out in Grand Junction, Colorado, a little bit of a time difference. And we are also trying to get some on the back end. We are trying to get some parts back on 4699 because 4699 has to be at opening weekend for the Carolina Cobras National Arena Football League game here in about 3 weeks. And I'll be honest, I haven't unloaded the race trailer from King of the Hammers.
That's fair.
Not gonna lie, like I've just been busy. Like it just is what it is. So we got to get that unloaded. We got to get some parts coming in. So we just we got to get that done. So we're trying to work out that schedule to get him in when we can meet with him and sit down for 45 minutes to an hour and really pick his brain about his side of it.
So
I'm pretty excited.
He's one of the guys that I've definitely wanted to kind of pick his brain about too, and especially hearing firsthand experience in R&D design, how their start to finish process on what they do, which I don't want to spoil anything. We haven't asked these guys any questions yet, so I don't know what we're even going to ask them yet, but I know that is coming up, and I definitely want to let everyone know that we've got some really cool interviews coming up, and that is the first of many very cool interviews that I'm super excited about.
We'll tease the next one after, Dan.
For sure.
Hopefully we can get that up for next week's episode. If not, we'll talk about something else. We could always use ideas. Make sure, like, comment, subscribe to the podcast. But in those comments, drop us some lines on some issues or some topics that you guys might like to hear us talk about. If we can go in depth on something you might want to see, might want to hear about. So definitely like the podcast, review it, give us all the feedbacks, and make those comments about stuff you'd like, so that we have ideas for episodes. If I have to push
so that we can do our own R&D and make this show better.
you just went there.
Oh,
I guess we do need to talk about Outlaw R&D team here. All right, that's all I've got for this episode. I think it was a good one. We definitely covered a wide range of stuff in the R&D hemisphere, some of them fear, whatever. Can't wait to do it again next week, whether that's the interview with Dan or another topic. We will be back regardless. Don't forget Friday, the mailbag drops again, where we answer your questions or just some really random, stupid stuff that we found on the internet, because there's plenty of it out there in the Friday mailbag. All right, guys. Caleb, outstanding as always. Look forward to doing it again. That is all I have. I am ready to check out. We will see everyone next week.
You've been listening to Dirt to Dust, presented by Outlaw Off-Road, the premier off-road centers for Jeeps, trucks, and SUVs. Sounds a little bit arrogant, doesn't it? Oh, well. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. Be sure to tell your friends about the show, too. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, to see more and to see what Outlaw Off-Road offers, hit the website at theoutlawoffroad.com. See you next time. Don't follow us. You're not going to make it.